And this perhaps is the issue ultimately that I think is why people voted, or 3 million of them, asked for another general election. It is the breach of trust between Westminster and the country on immigration. I'm not even discussing the boats. No logical argument for this whatsoever, other than both the government in certain parts of the north and the Conservative Party in most of the south don't want to face reform.
The world of British politics has always been filled with shocks, twists, and dramatic turns. But what happened today has left the nation in utter disbelief. Nigel Farage, one of the most controversial yet influential political figures of our time, stepped in front of the cameras and made an announcement so powerful, so dramatic, that it could change the course of British history forever. This came just hours after the shocking news broke that the UK elections had been cancelled. Yes, you heard that right, cancelled. A moment that has thrown the entire political system into chaos and left millions of voters stunned, frustrated, and angry. And right at the center of it all stands the Labour Party, facing what many are now calling its final days. The cancellation of the elections has not only shattered trust in the democratic process, but also ignited a firestorm of anger among the British people. Families who had been preparing to cast their votes, communities who had been debating passionately about the future of the country, and ordinary citizens who simply wanted their voices heard suddenly found themselves silenced. For a nation that prides itself on democracy, this was nothing short of a nightmare. It felt like the very foundation of Britain was being shaken. And it was in this atmosphere of disbelief and outrage that Nigel Farage decided to step forward.
That is what is happening. I am very, very angry about this, as should voters be.
The thing is, Reform is definitely winning at the moment, right? Because Labour are flailing and failing on all sorts of issues. Immigration, NHS, obviously grooming gangs, etc. But the Tories also didn't do that well. So it's very easy. Reform at the moment sort of have a clean slate.
What they were actually expressing was a sense of utter disenchantment with the entire political system.
Farage has always been known as a man who thrives in moments of chaos. For decades, he has positioned himself as the outsider, the rebel voice against the political establishment. Love him or hate him, no one can deny his influence in shaping modern Britain, especially during the Brexit years. But this announcement went beyond anything he had ever done before. Standing before a live audience, cameras flashing, and the nation glued to their screens, he declared that this was the moment the people must rise, that this was the final nail in the coffin for the Labour Party, and that he was prepared to lead the charge. The room went silent, then erupted with applause, gasps, and stunned faces. Farage had captured the mood of the nation in a single moment. He spoke of betrayal, of a political class that had lost touch with its people, and of a government that was more interested in clinging to power than respecting democracy. His voice, fiery and unwavering, resonated with millions watching at home. Whether people agreed with his policies or not, there was no denying that his words carried weight. He had turned what seemed like political chaos into a rallying cry for change. For the Labour Party, this couldn't have come at a worse time. Already struggling under the weight of scandals, broken promises, and deep divisions within its own ranks, Labour was clinging to the hope that the elections would provide a chance to prove themselves. They needed this vote, perhaps more than any other party in Britain. But with the elections cancelled, their future suddenly looked bleak. Critics immediately began to suggest that Labour had played a role in this decision, that they had pushed for the cancellation out of fear of losing.
And this debate can be used as a game of ping-pong this afternoon between the two political parties that have dominated British politics since the end of the First World War. But actually something bigger is going on out there.
Right off the bat, Farage dropped a bombshell that people aren't just fed up, there's something deeper going on.
Have a think about the fact that the Labour Party got a third of the vote and 2/3 of the seats. For every Labour MP, there are 34,000 votes. For every Reform MP...
Whether true or not, the damage was done. The people no longer trusted them, and Nigel Farage wasted no time in seizing that opportunity. He looked directly into the cameras and said words that will be remembered for years to come. This is not just about politics, this is about the survival of our democracy. And I will not stand by while the people are robbed of their voice. It was a statement that cut through the noise, a declaration that placed him at the center of the national conversation. In that moment, it wasn't just a speech, it was a warning to Labour, to the political elite, and to anyone who thought they could silence the will of the people. As his words echoed across television screens, social media exploded. Hashtags supporting Farage began trending instantly. Memes, clips, and fiery debates filled every corner of the internet.
And with the national insurance increases, yet another hammer blow to the men and women running small businesses in this country. They had not expected this. They were promised it wouldn't happen in the run-up to the general election. And we find that even now affects GP surgeries in the constituency and hospices close to it. So perhaps you can see why people are upset. They feel things are being done to them they didn't have realistic expectations of.
Some called him the savior of British democracy, while others accused him of exploiting the chaos for his own gain. But no matter which side you were on, you couldn't ignore the fact that Nigel Farage had just changed the game. The cancellation of the elections had already left people questioning the future. But now, with Farage's dramatic intervention, those questions became even louder. Where does Britain go from here? What happens when the people lose faith in the system that is supposed to represent them? And perhaps most importantly, is this truly the end for the Labour Party as we know it? The truth is, Labour has been on shaky ground for years. From one leader to the next, the party has struggled to find its identity, torn between its traditional working-class roots and the more modern, progressive voices within its ranks. Each election brought promises of unity, but instead delivered more division. Each leader spoke of renewal, but instead the party continued to fracture.
The economy works on confidence. People borrow money, lend money according to confidence in each other. And in the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I mean, we've got two people who look like they're going to a family funeral every day. There is an air of miserablism. Even a speech from the Prime Minister, the complete opposite to Tony Blair. This isn't things can only get better, it's things can only get worse.
And now, in the most critical moment of all, with the very future of democracy hanging in the balance, Labour stands weakened and vulnerable. Nigel Farage knows this better than anyone. He has built his career on exploiting the weaknesses of his opponents. He understands the power of timing, and this time, his timing couldn't have been more precise. By stepping into the spotlight at the very moment Labour was at its weakest, he positioned himself not just as a political leader, but as a defender of the people. And in politics, perception is everything. For many watching, it felt as though the torch of leadership had been passed in that instant. No longer was Labour seen as the party of the people. That title, at least for now, seemed to belong to Nigel Farage. The Labour Party's days, as Farage himself said, looked numbered. And while his critics may dismiss his announcement as theatrics, the undeniable truth is that it struck a chord with millions who felt abandoned, ignored, and betrayed. But the question remains, what comes next? The elections are cancelled, the people are furious, and the political establishment is scrambling to contain the fallout. Nigel Farage has made his move, but will it be enough to shift the balance of power completely? Or is this just the beginning of an even greater storm? The cancellation of the elections sent immediate shockwaves through Parliament. Labour MPs were seen rushing into private rooms, their phones buzzing constantly, their faces etched with disbelief. The Conservative Party, though still deeply wounded by its recent defeats, looked on with a mix of cautious hope and quiet relief. For them, this sudden twist in the game meant Labour's victory lap had been abruptly cut short, leaving space for other voices to rise.
The idea of a 22 billion black hole is nonsense. It's 2.7 trillion. The national debt is massive. It exploded over the course of the last... It increased by 2.5 times over the course of the last 14 years, and it's set to go higher still. We are in much deeper difficulty economically. Even to talk about a £22 billion black hole is not to understand the problems that we've got.
Their final days might not come in a single blow, but in the slow, steady unraveling of trust. And as the country looked on, many wondered if this moment would be remembered as the day Nigel Farage turned chaos into destiny. As the days rolled on, the sense of urgency only grew stronger. Newspapers, television panels, and online forums were flooded with debates over what had just happened. Was this the collapse of Labour's credibility, or was it simply a temporary storm they could weather with spin and promises? The truth was, the cancellation had pulled back the curtain. It had revealed the fragile trust holding the party together, and once broken, that trust was nearly impossible to repair. Nigel Farage, with his announcement, had struck at the heart of that weakness. He painted himself not as a politician looking for power, but as a patriot demanding fairness. He spoke of ordinary Britons, the family squeezed by rising bills, the workers drowning in uncertainty, the young people who no longer believed politicians cared about their voices. And while Labour scrambled behind closed doors to regain control of the narrative, Farage was already shaping the battlefield. For the first time in decades, the Labour Party looked vulnerable not to their traditional rivals, but to a movement that had grown from the frustration of ordinary citizens. The words "final days for Labour" stopped sounding like a dramatic headline and began to feel like a prediction. Because once the people lose faith, no machine, no PR spin, and no carefully rehearsed speeches can bring it back.
We have zero growth in this country.
The whole 22 billion black hole idea was nothing more than a shameless excuse Starmer used to hide the bigger problem.
That this government has talked us into a recession because confidence is falling to that degree. And you might note that the more rapidly legal migration rises, the more rapidly the population expands, the poorer we get as individuals. The last 2 years have seen record.
Farage's announcement wasn't just about a cancelled election. It was about a new chapter for Britain, one where the establishment no longer had the monopoly on power, one where leaders were held accountable, and one where the people's voice could no longer be delayed or silenced. And so, as Britain held its breath, watching history unfold, the question was no longer whether Labour could survive. The question was whether this moment would mark the true beginning of their end. A slow fall into irrelevance, or a collapse so sudden that it would shock the nation. Either way, the people would remember. The urgency, the passion, the anger. It all leads us to this moment. Do you believe Labour's final days are here, or can they still hold on against the rising tide? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters in shaping this story. Thank you for watching, and if you don't want to miss the next twist in this unfolding political drama, make sure you subscribe right now. Hit the bell icon, stay informed, and join us as we continue uncovering the truth that the mainstream refuses to show. Until next time, stay aware, stay engaged, and never stop demanding the democracy you deserve.